Oh my God.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started shortly. We just want to give everyone some time to get in. We see the numbers increasing. Welcome, everyone. We're still going up. Thank you for joining us today. We're a little behind, so I think we're going to just get started. And if you all will indulge me, before we get started, I want to ask that we have a moment of silence for all the victims of empire and hubris, past, present, and future. So if we can just have a quick moment of silence for them, please. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know the Palestinians that we were able to spend time with would so appreciate your attendance. And so we are so glad to be here with you. My name is Mungin Gomane, and I was one of these pilgrims on the trip that we took to Palestine with these amazing faith leaders that you see here on the screen. Our group was brought together by Sabeel and FOSNA to embark on a pilgrimage to bear witness to what our Palestinian brothers and sisters are subjected to every day. And I think it is very important to say that the trip reaffirmed for us the importance of calling out the reality on the ground, even when those labels make some uncomfortable. As a South African American whose parents lived through apartheid, who has heard the stories firsthand, the parallels between what is currently happening in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories and South Africa are too numerous, I think, to name. And yet the situation is worse. So we will do our best to name them. And for us, the parallels began when we arrived at the border between Jordan and Israel. And there was a line for Palestinians and then a line for everyone else. And someone in our group said to me, you know, it was an introduction to the country that we were walking into. And what was so interesting about that is it reminded me of when you enter South Africa and you were driving from the airport in Cape Town into town, where you pass the townships that Black South Africans live in because they were expelled from their homes. And we know that Palestinians have been expelled from their homes and continue to be expelled from their homes. We stood with Alice Cassia and her mother, Michelle, in Al Makrur, and we looked across at the land and the home that they were forcibly removed from by Israeli settlers and heard about the violence that they were subjected to, and even Alice being arrested because she refused to leave her home. The Israeli system is set up to touch every aspect of the lives of Palestinians, from the roads that they drive on to the cities that they can and cannot enter, the water, electricity, and other resources that they are allowed to have and are rationed and do not have access to the land that has been in families for over 200 years, but is not recognized by the Israeli state. And a really important example of that was when our group was able to have lunch with Daoud Nasser and his family on their land where they have been harvesting olive trees for over 200 years. A land that settlers attack during harvest season, but also year round, and that the Israeli government has been trying to seize for the last 70 years, but for the last 33 years, they've been in a legal battle with the government. We also ate in the home of Iyad Bernat, who, along with 3 of his 4 sons, has been arrested numerous times, 18 times himself, and has had weekly attacks by the Israeli forces, where in the last attack, it was following another delegation of Sabeel pilgrims, and they attacked his home. We saw the couches and the chairs that had been ripped up, the computers and the TVs that had been destroyed. And then finally, we met with Hind Shraida from Transparency Palestine and learned about administrative detention, or what we would have called in South Africa, detention without trial. And so I think it's important to just say it is no coincidence that Israel was the apartheid government in South Africa's closest military ally, and people who today do not want to acknowledge that it is called apartheid call that based on technicalities to silence our voices. But human rights organizations like Amnesty International, the UN, Human Rights Watch, and the Israeli org B'Tselem have described Israel's policies as constituting apartheid. So we just want to know, when will it be enough? We refuse to allow people to move the goalpost because the situation does not exactly mirror that of South Africa. As I said, it is worse. And finally, as much as I'm proud of my heritage and being the granddaughter of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, I'm also acutely aware that people loved everything my grandfather said, except for when it came to Palestine. So I want to make sure that I bring in other voices to speak to their experience in Palestine and how it connects to the Black experience in America. So I want to ask my sister, Reverend Tabitha Hawley, if she'll share with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mungi. Greetings, everyone. My name is Reverend Tabitha Hawley. I am a resident of the Bronx, New York, where I am a faith leader. I commend the work of Sabeel and FOSNA and the ways that they bear witness to the legacy of liberation theology for all oppressed people around the globe. Surely I bring you greetings from the Black Christ, the Palestinian Christ, who is on the side of the Palestinian people. And I'd like to reflect today on the experience that I had in Hebron, in the West Bank, because my own roots run deep into the soil of the Jim Crow South. I was born in Albany, Georgia, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that Blacks had learned to straighten their backs so that no white men would walk over them. And so it is that on this sunny day, in the middle of October in Hebron, just a few weeks ago, this is the land of the Palestinians that is occupied by Israel. It is on this road where I used a segregated bathroom and walked down a segregated street, only for use by Christians and Jews. And at the end of that segregated road in Hebron, our Palestinian host was interrogated by about 4 men in plain clothes. They were armed with rifles, and I suppose they stopped to see where we were headed. Having heard the experiences of Palestinians who had no citizenship and therefore no rights, I knew in my bones that we were at the mercy of those armed settlers. My Black body grew weak and I fell to the earth, and I wailed before God and my comrades, remembering the words of the psalmist. I will lift up mine eyes to the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. As I began to lift up my eyes to recover my strength on that sunny October day, there were the barrels of those settler guns. And there, with Reverend Naomi Tutu to my right side, embracing me in body and in spirit, I began to lift up my eyes to recover my strength, and the hills were occupied by Israeli settlers. Stolen land possessed by those tricked by Israeli propaganda and the misinterpreted words of sacred texts. Much like the sons and the daughters of white former slave owners who joined the ranks of the Ku Klux Klan in my home country. Those that burned down Black churches and terrorized Black school children, working to break down the backs of Black people, Black men, Black women, and Black children. working to break down the inherent pride and God-given dignity bestowed on all human beings at birth. Beloved, it is a sad and terrifying shame that our U.S. government funds such insidious, racist, settler colonial violence while it continues to oppress Black bodies. And so it is before my colleague, Minister Arcane, speaks more about the terror of settler colonial violence in Palestine. I want to say publicly that I thank God today for my sister, Reverend Naomi Tutu. For without her wit and her wisdom and her courage and her strength, I don't know that I would have found the strength and the human capacity to get up and keep marching in my dignity. Surely it was the hands of the ancestors on my left side nudging me to strengthen my own back, to keep on marching toward the liberation highway. And surely my eyes were reset. They were refocused on the hills from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the hills of God. They don't come from the hills of the global north, where settlers go to reside, nor the hill where our mediocre Zionist politicians go to pass legislation. My help comes from a God who loves Black and Palestinian flesh. A God who loves our struggle for freedom, a God who cherishes us, who cherishes our connection to the land. And so stay steadfast, my siblings. We're going to keep on walking and keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Tabitha. I'm going to talk to you a few minutes about vicious and violent settler experience. My name is Minister Arcane Jantuan. I come from the great state of New Jersey. And one of the most alarming situations was witnessing violent settlers who are Israeli citizens who go into Palestinian communities to intimidate, to threaten, to brutalize, and sometimes kill Palestinians to steal their land, their homes, and their property. International law says that Israeli citizens cannot leave Israeli territory to enter Palestinian land in the West Bank to seize, steal, confiscate, or take land, property, or homes that don't belong to them. It's a direct violation of international law. Imagine wherever you reside, there's someone who drives 15 minutes, maybe 20, 30, or even up an hour to come to your house, to beat you, to torture you, to intimidate you until you leave your property. That's what's happening on a daily basis. And because Israel is a lawless apartheid state who answers to no one, not even America, who just gave them $22 billion of our tax dollars to kill more Palestinian people. The Israeli government empowers Israeli citizens to confiscate land and property in the name of a distorted form of settler colonial religion. I thought these violent settlers were coming from Tel Aviv until one of them passed us by speaking perfect English. And one of the women yelled out, "Don't even believe what he's saying. He lying." And I was like, man, that sounds like somebody right down the street from me. And one of the Palestinian families told us that those who are terrorizing them in their neighborhoods lived in America. And when we inquired more, they were like, some of them are from New Jersey, from New York, from Massachusetts. And you can kind of see this pattern of all this Northeast just there, present. And so what I was thinking is, you have people who potentially are my neighbors, who potentially say hi to me every morning, but either the next day or the following week or months or later down the year, they're in Israel beating, attacking, and killing Palestinians in their land. And there's no justice or accountability whatsoever in America for the terrorism that they do on a daily basis to the Palestinian families. And when we met with Palestinian families in East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem and Hebron and Ramallah, we learned what settler terrorism was. When we heard the stories of how the settlers would come into their lands and kill all the animals that they relied in the farms to survive. We learned how they bulldozed 300 olive trees and crops from farmers so that they could not survive on an income, so they could not sell their products. We saw them, we heard stories of them breaking into doors at 3 o'clock in the morning and having guns put to the face of children and saying that they need to leave their homes and leave this land because it's theirs and not theirs. We saw how these settlers work with local governments to bulldoze part of homes to make the rest of the house unlivable. And most of the land taken by settlers were above the Palestinian homes. So they always took the territories above their homes. And when we saw that there was these tent-like setups over the houses, and we were trying to figure out why these nets were here, and they would tell us that they would have these nets because they would throw garbage and pee and feces at the Palestinian people from above. And this is the situation, that everyday terrorism that they have to deal with. Even Palestinian citizens who live within the new Israeli borders face similar situations where their homes have been seized and the lands of generations have been taken away by the state and given to the Israeli citizens of Jewish identity. The legal system doesn't even give Palestinians the right to defend themselves or prove ownership of their property because all the restrictions and bureaucracy and systems that prevent them from gathering their own paperwork. A community like Lifta, what belongs to Palestinians for hundreds of years, was wiped out because of government rule. And when we talk about the military and the police and the state violence, yes, they're present, but not to enforce the law, not to defend, but to only protect settler violence. And even when Palestinians are brutalized and killed, they protect the settlers. The police watch as violations take place. The military will arrest Palestinians just for standing up. And the state sponsors state demolitions and terrorism. As I get ready to close, this is all done in the name of economics. There are funds in America where people are putting money into this fund in order to fund settler movement and property building and land seizing and terrorism on a daily basis. And it's happening right in our neighborhoods. The Palestinian people are bold, they're courageous, and they're fearless, but they don't have the tools and the means of defending themselves. And this is my witness of the Jim Crow Israel.
Thank you, Archange. I just want to check if our fellow traveler, David, Anthony, is on. Sorry, David.
All good.
And if Anthony is prepared to offer some words. If not, we will pass it on to Charlene. Charlene, do you mind?
Hello, everyone. My name is Charlene Walker, and I am a faith-based organizer. That is also a faith leader, you might say, that leads people of faith in order to live out their faith by doing the work of justice. When I left to go on to this pilgrimage that I was called to, that the divine pushed me to go to, the thing that I asked over and over again is, where is God in all of this? Where is our faith? How is God, the divine spirit, God of many names, actually showing up in this space and in this time? The Holy Land, right? The Holy Land is this place where Abrahamic faiths have walked together for centuries. And as we walk the streets of Jerusalem, of all of the places that we have heard of in different religious texts, I kept looking for God. what I noticed was there's all this reverence for all of these beautiful places of where Jesus walked, of where our beloved prophets roamed this earth. There's reverence for where the Holy Tomb is, beautiful space. There's reverence for Al-Aqsa Mosque, all of these wonderful places. But what I am also reminded of that we heard when we went to go visit Alaska Mosque is that that is not our faith. It is not the building. It is not the temple. It is not the structure, even though we can see all of these wonderful things. The thing that I noticed as we walked around and I was looking and trying to figure out where was God, there were some prophetic voices. Reverend Munther, who we had a chance to actually meet with and talk to, still a prophetic voice. But where I found faith was not in the most likely of places. It was not within the walls of where the Holy Tomb is. It was not in any building that we actually walked inside of, led by faith leaders. Where I found faith was us walking down the street and talking to people. Faith was when we went into UNRWA and we talked to the leader there to hear how their staff show up day in and day out to make sure that people are fed, that they have vaccines, that they can actually go to school. And then when they are done with their shift, they themselves go get into line. That is faith, beloved. Faith that what they are doing will keep people alive and that God will be able to carry us through something else. I saw faith when we went through Hebron. And as we walked through Hebron, we walked down an alley where it used to be a market where people would sell their food. And as we walked down, I saw faith.
I have to do something. I'll be right there, man. Go ahead.
When all of a sudden, an M16 was pointed at us from above our heads and pointed at the children that were with us. And it was the voice of the children that told us not to fret and say, come on now, let's make sure we go before they shoot us. And our guide making a small joke to try and lighten the mood because this is every day. Every day that M16s are being pointed at people. I saw faith when we sat on a playground surrounded by children and people who have been displaced, who are fighting to keep their land and telling our story, even though they just the other night had been kneeled down in the middle of the night with a gun up to their head and told to go and being abused. And faith showed up when the settlers decided to drive down the hill, get out of the car, dressed up in like military with an M16, about the age of 19. But faith showed up because the people said, you know what? It is my camera that is my weapon. And they took video and picture, and we stood there in solidarity, even though we knew at any moment that M16 could have been turned on any of us. I saw faith show up when we walked through Lifted, and it was the grandchildren of those who lived there before, showing us their homes, which was ground central for the depopulation and ethnic cleansing that we see now. But they took off of work to make sure they could be there because they have enough faith to say that if we do this work and we do these actions and people go back and tell our stories, that we might actually have something different show up. I saw faith in our journalists who are being gunned down left and right, and they're asking the question, am I doing enough? Will it even matter? Knowing that they have a target on their back. Yet I remember one conversation that I had with a wonderful reporter about what are the seeds that you are planting in your children and for the next 7 generations. Your act is actually going to help bring about the change if we all work together. I saw so much faith as we walked throughout this entire place. I saw faith when we sat there and we sat with a family and each and every one of them was like, well, I was arrested. I was in administrative detention. They threw away the key, but you know what? I came home because I have faith that we will someday be free. So when I ask where faith is showing up, it is the people. God is with us, and we are constantly journeying together. And it is our prophetic faith and our belief in each other and the divine that is seeing us through. Faith that says, open your home, even though you are in a house of rest. The Grand Sheikh for Al-Aqsa Mosque could not leave, but he said, you know what? Come here. I will sit and I will talk with you regardless, because I have faith that you telling my story and telling the story of all that you have seen here will actually bring about some type of change. So God is walking with us. The church is not just within some walls. The temple, the mosque is not within some walls. As we saw in Al-Makur, they actually set up church and prayed outside, anywhere that they could find, because it is their faith that is guiding them to make sure they can continue. And in closing, I want to say, I see faith every single day that we talk to our friend Malak, who is in Gaza, who is 19 years old and refuses to go quietly, make sure that she can tell her story over and over and over again, so that someday her people will be free. That is the faith, that is the radical faith and the radical love and action that we are seeing in Gaza. Anthony, I'm going to throw it to you.
Thank you so much, and apologies for my location right now. I'm en route to Ecuador to meet with Afro-Ecuadorians, as I am on a global mission to learn more about the ways that environmental racism is used as a weapon against oppressed people and formerly, if not still, colonized people around the world. My time in Palestine and what we refer to now as the State of Israel, or Eretz Israel, opened my eyes even more to the axiomatic nexus between the forms of environmental warfare that we experience as Black people in the United States is the same type of environmental warfare that Afro-Colombians experience where I am now, and the same that I'm sure I'm going to see with Afro-Ecuadorians as well. As the lone and proud anti-Zionist Jewish person on this amazing delegation, I think the first thing that really touched my heart was what's being done in the name of a beautiful, great faith that really brought to the world this idea of the golden rule, which is simply treat everyone as you would like to be treated. We have stories in Judaism called midrashes. And one of them, which is my favorite, is that a young aspiring rabbi travels literally the world to go and meet with who was considered Rav Nachman at the time, the greatest rabbi, the greatest sage, who had all the wisdom of Judaism, of what to do, what not to do, and as well as Quranic verses. So this gentleman, after traveling months, finally gets an audience with Rav Nachman. And he says, Rav Nachman, I challenge you to jump on one foot and tell me the essential teachings of Judaism, everything, and do it in less than 2 sentences. Rav Nachman looked at the boy, laughed, and started jumping on one leg and said simply, treat everyone as you would like to be treated. Everything else is just commentary. It's such a simple concept that obviously the state of Israel knows better than anyone, which is why I do like to say and like to distinguish between Judaism and the Israelism that we saw while we were there. And in this case, as it pertains to environmental warfare, we know that the Palestinian people, especially in Raqqa, have been experiencing the nadir of environmental genocide, environmental warfare. We know that it's US tax dollars that are funding not just the fossil fuels necessary to carry out these atrocities, but also the emissions that they have to do with. We know for a fact that this genocide over the last year in Gaza, as well as the ethnic cleansing, all of the activities of the Israeli occupying force has released the equivalent of emissions of 10 African nations. 10 African nations. So we know it's contributing to the climate crisis. But on the local front, it is these Palestinians that have to breathe in these emissions as they're just trying to breathe and stay alive in general. That has nothing to do with Judaism, nor the Jewish tenet of tikkun olam, which means to repair the world. Repairing the world also means to repair people. And in its, I would have to say, beguiling and capture of colonization, the Israeli and Zionist regime has forgotten about their Jewish teachings, because the Jewish teachings are all about keeping people connected to land, There are so many Quranic verses that talk about this. Many of our prayers in Judaism give thanks to the vine that provides wine, gives thanks to the land that provides bread. But we also must, also in the way we treat our land, also treat people, especially when these people are cousins of the same patriarch and matriarch of Abraham, and Sarai or Sarah. The last things that I do want to say is that environmental racism that we experience in Eretz Israel is also a function of gentrification that we see in the United States. We know now that one of the biggest issues, as was already explained, is the building of settlements in the more pristine areas of this disputed territory, specifically the areas that have access to water. We know from the United States and our solidarity with Standing Rock, Minnie Wachoni, water is life. This is especially salient in a place in a geography like Palestine and Israel, yet we are seeing settlers now positioning themselves in areas where Palestinians have depended on water for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Taking over that water, in a sense, is also a form of environmental racism, because environmental racism is also a system of neglect. And we're neglecting people from the very substance that they need to stay alive. You are also sending a message that they are dehumanized. So that's one thing. Also, we spoke briefly, I think, about the idea of mass incarceration. We know as Black people in the United States that the people who are subjected to the worst environments, toxic air, toxic land, toxic water, are also subjected to over-policing, also subjected to mass incarceration. I'm here to say that after learning about the situation in Eretz Israel, I am ready to say proudly and in front of everyone as an anti-Zionist Jew that the new Jim Crow in Israel wears a yarmulke and is a Zionist. 2% of the Israeli population is made up of Black Ethiopian Jews, yet 30% of Israel's prison population is made up of Ethiopian Jews. That per capita is a worse and more iniquitous situation than what we face in the United States. And the last thing that I'll say, though, is that what we took back with us are these stories from real people. You just heard from Sister Charlene and others. Bring back that narrative, bring back their gospel, bring back their truth. That is the biggest weapon. That is the biggest weapon that we can use. That is what the Zionist regime does not want to be transmitted to the world, because they know that they have already lost the battle of world opinion. They've lost the battle of morality. So here's what I will say, because this is all about planting seeds, which is one of the most environmental things that you can do. Seeds represent the narrative that form the roots of our resistance. Water represents what we use to nourish those seeds, the organizing that we do. This right here, as you see, is a collective organizing of Black faith leaders coming from many denominations of Christianity and a Black Jew from Brooklyn, who affirm to the fact that unless we get to the bottom of this, the root causes of the climate crisis are the same root causes as this genocide: white supremacy ideology, colonization, and patriarchy. We are going to plant those seeds of truth as we tell the full story about how environmental racism is absolutely used as a weapon in a larger pogrom of ethnic cleansing and genocide. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to go off camera and catch my flight. I just want to say that I love all of these people who I'm honored to be with on this screen. And I really do hope that you will be in the fight for the long term. As one person in Palestine said to me, we cannot Standing Rock Palestine. We can't make it some flashpoint that is popular now with our kafiyas and in fashion, the in vogue resistance, and then forget about it 2 months from now. That would be a death sentence to the people who we are coming to stand with. So do not Standing Rock Palestine. Talk about it every single day. Don't worry about offending anyone. And don't worry, and then please, please, please do not be scared by any false claims of anti-Semitism, okay? Because that's not what we're doing. Being Jewish also means to wrestle with God and also to wrestle with the truth. And if the worst thing that they can do is make up lies like anti-Semitism, we already know that our message is working. So I'll leave on that. Thank you. Much love and God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much.
Travel well.
Before we move to questions, David is just going to share a few photos from the trip, just so everyone can have a bit more of a view to what we saw and experienced.
Just before I do that, I just wanted to say, man, I appreciate everything that everybody has said. It was talked about or shared with us by a Palestinian theologian while we were there, that just the importance of bearing witness. And there's a lot of people that I think are doing a lot of witnessing and not a lot of bearing. And so that's part of what this action is and our step forward. I'll share one small thing, and it's that last night, pretty late at night, I was, walking up the stairs to go to bed, and I heard a small voice coming from my daughter's room way past her bedtime. And I peeked in, and she had a little flashlight. She's 7 years old, and she was reading. She just learned to read, so this is a big deal. And I kind of sat by her door until she stopped reading and she kind of read her own self to sleep. And I share that because just, my role on this trip was a photographer, was a seer, was also a faith leader. And one of the things that really pressed upon me, and everybody beautifully touched on it a little bit already, was just to see some of the resilience of the children that were there. And specifically children I think of in Hebron that Archange and a few others talked about, where, we were at one spot in Hebron where we saw an IDF soldier literally point a gun towards us and some children. And my daughter was reading because she had library day today, and she wanted to be good to read in front of everybody. And that's why she was focusing on that. But we met kids that were the exact same age, and their focus is on not getting shot. And so just the flat humanity of that, we can talk politics till we're blue in the face. But I have a child under my roof that her biggest concern is making sure she can read coherently. And we interacted with children that were also 7-year-old, that their interest is survival today. And so that was really just something that impressed upon me. And so as I share some of these images, I just want you to, for a second, maybe just watch the humanity of it and sort of receive it that way. So give me a second and I will pull these up. Okay. Let me know if you can see that. Okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
Can see it.
The music turned off though.
Okay. Give me one quick second, y'all. Okay, I got it now. You see it okay?
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. After the darkness is light. So don't you be afraid. When it comes the long night. Long night. Have faith, journey along. If you don't know, the path is long. But if you try, you'll surely grow to heal past the sorrow that been keeping you low. You low, so grow, 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 grow. on your way. Even if the journey is cold, believe in love today. And I know that you will grow day by day. If you walk with love, you'll never be astray. Just grow, 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 grow. You got to grow, 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 grow. You got to grow. Gotta grow past these shortcomings. And slowly and surely, we'll make it through.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. We are going to take some questions from the Q&A. To make it easier, the questions in the webinar chat, please ask them in the Q&A if you'd like them answered. And before we answer questions, I just want to say there will be a recording of this that we can share. I see a lot of people have asked about that. And also, this is sort of only the start of our advocacy, and our group will be sharing demands and continuing to advocate in our communities and together. So if you are interested in helping us, please, reach out to us, and we will start with the questions. I will read one, and hopefully someone from the group will jump in and answer. One that I saw that I think was important to ask is from Paula Roderick. Said, how can we as faith activists here educate our own communities about the dangers of Zionism and Christian nationality, and that speaking out against apartheid is not anti-Semitic?
I'm happy to jump in. I am the Reverend Ndombi Naomi Tutu. I am an Episcopal priest. I am South African and American, US. I serve presently as a priest associate at All Saints Episcopal Church in Atlanta. And I really do, that question around what is our responsibility as faith leaders is one that I am fighting with myself. I think that one is that we need to use our pulpits as places where we highlight that what is happening in Palestine and Israel is apartheid, and that we have to be courageous in speaking out to give our parishioners, those who follow us, also the courage to speak out. I think the silence, Reverend Munther said that this is not a test of the faith and humanity of Palestinians. This is a test of the faith and humanity of the rest of the world. And I believe that is the absolute truth, and that we have a particular responsibility as Christian faith leaders, because Christian nationalism is so much tied with Christian Zionism, trying to say that Israel is a biblical land. And so we as faith leaders have to use every opportunity that we have to speak out, but also to be educating our congregations about the fact that being anti-Zionist Israel is not about being anti-Semitic, and constantly challenging that use of anti-Semitism to silence people's criticism of Israel. And we know how strong that lobby is of using anti-Semitism as a weapon to silence any criticism of Israel. As Mungi said, people loved everything that my father stood for. They kept lauding his role in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. But when he and President Jimmy Carter stood up and spoke out against Zionism in Israel, they were labeled anti-Semitic, and actions were taken against them, who have greater status than any of us on this call will ever have internationally. So we have to be prepared to be attacked and to stand strong in the face of those attacks, and to be clear that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitic.
Thank you, Mom. I saw a question that actually I think is something that our group is wrestling with, because we actually did visit UNRWA while we were in Jerusalem. And the question is, the Israeli Knesset just voted to expel UNRWA from the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. What can you do to stop Israel from expelling UNRWA, which would be catastrophic for Palestinians? What can you do to influence Biden and Harris and our US senators and representatives to stop arming Israel unless Israel revokes its decision to expel UNRWA? Woo!
To me, organize your congregations, organize your communities to protest in the face of this. Protest at every polling place, every place that you have to pass by and deal with the reality of all these people running for office and not doing anything. We have the capacity, if we choose, to stand up. Even if you're by yourself with a placard walking back and forth, we have to stand up. As people who live in America and who are constantly profiting from America's ills around the world.
And I would, sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. And I would just like to add that, you know, the fact that such great action has been taken against student protesters in the US protesting the genocide in Gaza and the ongoing settler violence in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. To me, it makes it clear how actually effective that protest has been. And as somebody who saw the protest movements of students in the move against apartheid in South Africa, and the great effect that had on US representatives and therefore on bills that were passed, the anti-apartheid bill that passed Congress was because of grassroots activism, because people kept writing to their Congress people, so that even when President Reagan vetoed that bill, the Congress knew that they had to respond because of the actions of their constituents. And therefore, I say to people, do not be convinced that your voice, your vote has no power. That if we write letters to our representatives, if we call our representatives, they have to pay attention if enough of us do it. And as a South African, I am living proof of what happens when people on the ground take up the struggle around the world. That when people here continue to push for divestment from South Africa, when colleges, churches, organizations push for divestment from companies doing business in South Africa, the business community had to respond. And it is the same here. If we put pressure, if we make calls, if we write letters, if we push the divestment bills in our state and local governments, they have to respond. And UNRWA is such an important part of Palestinians' absolute survival. Not just giving them extra. They are key to people's survival. They supply food, they supply shelter, they supply medicine. And the removal of UNRWA is another of the actions of genocide that Israel is taking. And therefore, we have to be committed to activism against this what's the word in English? Expelling of UNRWA. Expellate.
Thank you, Mom. We're going to take a few more questions just so that we can stick to the time. There's a question from Brittany Boone that said, I wanted to hear your thoughts on what comes next. How do we best focus our energies and how do we motivate others to do the same? A lot of us know that there needs to be a change and are actively trying to make things better, but we are against a well-organized machine. How do we become better organized in our fight in the US? I will just say something quickly, but I think I remember on our trip, Charlene said something about the study that came out about the amount of people needed to enact change. And I don't want to misspeak, but I will say that when you need to rest, rest. There will be those of us there to pick up the mantle for you. And then when we need to rest, you will take over. So do what you need to do. Live a life that is full of joy. Rest when you need to, and continue to advocate. I think it's important to always make sure that our advocacy and our activism comes from a place of love. There is fear, but I think that fear cannot sustain us, only love can. And so I think that that's important to mention.
Yeah, and I actually want to also point out, there's no easy way to make change, y'all. Everyone wants a quick fix. And the reality is every single person on this call has a level of complacency in what is happening. And we have to take a good, hard look at ourselves. We want change without discomfort. It's not possible. Our beloveds are dying at the hands of a state. And until we decide that we are going to sacrifice our comfort for actually bringing about change, will it happen? That means you have to speak up. I always say that we are called to be prophets of the resistance, not chaplains to the empire. That is what our call is. Our call is to put ourselves on the line. I don't need to be popular, because at the end of the day, what I know is that my brothers and sisters are called to live. They are called to live a life of opportunity and a life that they can actually dream of, and to have 7 more generations. But that does not happen if we do not decide that we're going to do the hard things. The hard things include getting in the room with somebody that does not look like you, talk like you, speak like you, pray like you. Someone that you do not necessarily outrightly see yourself in, because this world has told us that we are so different, when it is not true. We all want the same things. We want our families to thrive. We want to be able to choose. We have so many things in common. There's this idea that there's justice for some and not for others. My mother used to say, people have me-itis. It's me and mine and nothing else. We can't live that way. That is what has gotten us here. What has gotten us here is deciding that what is more important is the dollar and our comfort. Which is more important is producing for someone else instead of actually growing and thriving. One of the things that I love most about being in Palestine was the care and the love that I saw of people for each other. You can't walk into a Palestinian home without getting offered coffee 3 times or a big plate of food and like love, like actual genuine love of each other. That is not the story they want us to believe, though. We have to dismantle all of these false narratives that are occurring and tell the truth. And the only way that happens is if we actually get real with ourselves and with each other and build deep relationships across differences. I am sick and tired of going online like I did this morning, and folks are talking about, oh, well, what is this fight to me? It is your brother. It is your sister. How have they showed up for me? Guess what? We are showing up for each other. And the thing that struck me was the Black struggle and the Palestinian struggle, and how when we walk around Palestine, there are murals to George Floyd, Malcolm X. Our resistance is shared. When Ferguson happened, it was Palestinian youth that told us how to deal with tear gas. We have always been inextricably tied. And that goes both ways. We all need to show up for each other, because there will be no liberation if we do not center Black liberation, which is tied to Palestinian liberation. And I think we have this global majority, right? We're not minorities. We are the global majority. If the global majority decides to sacrifice and do something different, it can be possible as long as we are committed to being uncomfortable, because we know and can dream of a world that is different, that loves all of us.
Thank you, Charlene. I just want to give anyone else a chance to respond before I choose a last 1 or 2 questions, depending
Yeah, I'll
on.
jump in with that, just because I really appreciate what Charlene was just saying. I was really just struck by the fact that, there's so many people that are in a hopeless situation, but show up for themselves in Palestine. These are not, people who view themselves as helpless. These are people that are organizing, that are doing what they can to pull their communities together. And I had mentioned on the trip that, and I was talking about my daughter before, her best friend is a Palestinian young girl, and she told her that she couldn't go home because they're fighting. And so my daughter asked if we could pray for them. So we've been praying for the Palestinian people every night in our prayers. And then when this opportunity came up, I thought about how we were praying for the Palestinian people every night, and was kind of faced with this moment where Jesus talks about, when I was in prison, you came and visited me. When I was hungry, you fed me. And it was that moment of like, okay, man, we're praying for these people, but at what point do we get uncomfortable and actually roll our sleeves up and go and help? And so for some people, that may not mean actually getting on a plane and going to Palestine. It may mean calling congressmen. It may mean using your pulpit. It may mean seeing what Palestinian initiatives you can get behind here. But I think what Charlene is saying is so key, is there's that moment that goes beyond thoughts and prayers. And it is activating, it is boots on the ground, is actually saying, yes, I'll pray, but then I'll actually go as well.
Thank you, David. A lot of the remaining questions sort of are different ways of wording things. I think that we have previously answered, but if anyone really does want an answer from someone specific in our group, please reach out to FOSNA. Tabitha, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I do.
Please.
Yeah, I just want to name and say again, as I said in my remarks, that, and I want to reiterate the words of our sister Charlene here on the call. Black liberation and Palestinian liberation is bound up together. When we walk the streets of our neighborhoods in urban cities, in rural towns across this country, Black people are struggling to survive. We are resilient people. We are meant to survive. And economically, as money goes into bombs, into weapons, into Israel, our communities are suffering. We see our people not being able to pay their rent. We see our people not be able to afford health care. We see our people go to schools that are underfunded. And we watch our government send billions of dollars across the ocean to kill and torture our people in Palestine. Black and Palestinian liberation are bound up together. And so if you are a faith leader, and we said this even on the ground to folks who were Palestinian, who were asking about, we have this broad range of support. I would say that to any leader, Jewish leaders, Black and Palestinian liberation are tied up together.
Thank you, Tabitha. Before I ask someone to sort of lead us out in a prayer, I know Arcane wants to say something.
Yeah, I want to say a few things. Number one, none of us profess to know all the answers, but our main job was to go and bear witness. I could speak for most people in here that we're carrying a lot with us. And this trip has not only just changed our life, but we're carrying the voices of people who told us not to forget them. And this is just one of the first steps. Like Tabitha said, the trip was just so familiar. And as a Black man in America, I was observing the police, I was observing the military, and they moved exactly like police in America. Like the National Guard when they're called into our communities. Or one of the Palestinian brothers said, when you pass by the officers, I was surprised you didn't answer them when they asked you where you're from. And I said, because we don't answer them when we're back home where we're from until we're being held up. And I was detained. And that feeling was familiar too. Trying to agitate me, trying to get under my skin, trying to provoke me so they could justify physically harming me or arresting me or keeping me longer. And we met a whole lot of Black Palestinians who shared with us the struggle, not just today, not just yesterday, but for decades. In solidarity, born there, generations born there, especially coming from Chad. I just want to say, no matter what you decide to do, you got to do it with all your heart. You got to be strategic, but you got to do your part. We can't expect people to stand with us until we stand with others. And if you're not standing with other people and you're waiting just for people to stand with you, you're part of the problem. So the question is, what are you doing to stand with your neighbors right now? What are you doing to stand with your Arab brothers and sisters right now? Your Black brothers and sisters, your poor brothers and sisters, your Latino brothers and sisters. And if you're not doing that work, then you need to shut your mouth. Because we need soldiers who can see the humanity right in their own neighborhoods so that we can lock arms together worldwide. So folks, we got to do the work. And I pray that we continue doing it together. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'd like us to end on that note. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, if you have further questions or, want to join up in our advocacy, it'll look different for everyone, but we are here to offer ideas and to work with you. So please reach out to FOSNA or Sabeel and they'll put you in touch with us. But again, thank you for joining us. We will continue to speak. And as I said, we will be sending out demands for lawmakers and hope that you keep an eye out. So thank you all for joining, and thank you to my family who traveled with me. Love you all.
Love you too.
Bye.
Love you, Archange.